So when Ronald Reagan was elected president of the United States in 1980, he had inherited kind of the Cold War. We had moved from containment to brinkmanship to detente, kind of a backing up. And by 1980, Reagan knew that the Soviet Union was on the ropes. And so what he decided to do was, as detente had kind of like separated us and to show more respect to communist countries, Reagan just went for the jugular. He was very upfront on calling the Soviet Union an evil empire. He realized that the Soviet Union was basically tapped out on the resources, so he started a huge amount of deficit spending to make things not only better in the short term for the United States, but to just put too much pressure on the Soviets so that there was no way they could catch up. For instance, he created the Strategic Defensive Initiative, which was popular named Star Wars. It basically is like from Austin Powers and GoldenEye. It's like basically satellites with lasers shooting down missiles. And completely impractical, but something that you would spend a lot of money on and that the Soviets would have to do as well. So what happens is basically they aren't going to be able to catch up. And with the Soviets, with Gorbachev, once he realizes what's happening, tries to change things, it's going to be too late, and this Cold War is going to end with a whimper in 1991. However, the Soviet Union isn't the first one to go down. What happens is there are revolutions in Eastern and Central Europe. So what happened, going all the way back to World War II, is the people were very excited for the Soviets to come in and liberate them from Germany, from that fascist government. However, it wasn't like they were as buddy-buddy with the Soviets as the Soviets would like. So what happened was is that while there were people installed and governments in place, there was kind of this kind of undercurrent of some people who didn't want to be communist or definitely not part of the Soviet Union at the very least. So what's going to happen is Nikita Khrushchev, who's going to be the leader after Stalin, is going to claim on one hand to be a more prosperous and humane communism than the harshness of Stalin. But when people started to ask for reform in Hungary and Czechoslovakia, they were just dashed completely. And so what happened um, was that there was always kind of like this undercurrent of like, hey, we might not want to be communist. And what's going to happen is by the time Gorbachev comes into play, the Soviet Union is in many ways tapped out. They had the huge issues with Afghanistan. They had the consumerism was so much worse, and the Soviets, the normal citizen's life in the Soviet Union was much worse than it was in the West. And so the Soviet Union, staring at bankruptcy, in fact, they were even having to get food from the United States. Gorbachev is going to do something very interesting. He is going to, we aren't going to know it at first, but he is going to realize that he has to withdraw from the Cold War, that the Soviets just can't keep up. So what he does is he actually first says that he's going to revoke or get rid of the Brezhnev doctrine. Brezhnev is the guy after Khrushchev. And Brezhnev is basically going to say, look, if anything's against communism in your country, we can come in and beat you up or quell the resistance. And so Gorbachev is going to announce that that doctrine is no more, that each country is going to have to do it their way, which is one of the reasons why some people called it the Sinatra doctrine. So with that, these different satellite nations start tiptoeing away from communism. And so what happens is eventually we start to see, once in the solidarity movement in Poland, we start to see in Hungary and all these other places, including Czechoslovakia, where they have a velvet revolution, where the communists are basically just voted out of office, and they're going to have democracy by 1990. They're going to get to split up their country in the velvet divorce. So we now have the Czech Republic and Slovakia. Romania tries to hold on to that hard Stalinist line, and he's killed. So there you go. Perhaps the most dramatic of this, especially as someone who was living during this time and watching this unfold behind my eyes, the real visual picture was the end of the Berlin Wall. So in 1989, it becomes clear that that many East Germans didn't want to be communists. They didn't want to be hooked up with us. They wanted to have the life that the West Berliners had. They wanted that. And so what ends up happening is that the Berlin Wall falls in 1989. Again, not by soldiers, but by a bunch of people with sledgehammers who just said enough is enough. And that's the end of the first subheading.